Hey, you gorgeous people. For this week, I'm inviting you to re listen to an oldie but goodie. Thanks for coming by. See you next week.
All right. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing the podcast. When you share this podcast with at least one other person, it grows our community of people who are doing the best they can to create lasting well being for themselves and making the planet a little bit brighter. So, thank you, thank you, thank you. Please pop over to the show notes. It should show up in whatever app you're using to listen to the podcast. It'll take you over to my link tree, and you can find out other ways of engaging with me, including being able to engage with me in individual therapy if that's something that you would like to do. I'm licensed in the state of Arizona for individual therapy. So if you live in Arizona, woohoo! If you do not live in Arizona in the United States of America, we can engage in some coaching. So with that, I want to tell you that I am an example of the topic for today. Today, we're going to talk about the dreaded drama triangle. Now, you may have heard of the drama triangle. There's a couple of ways that it shows up. One is there are three roles that people play in dysfunction. One is the victim. The version we are going to talk about today is victim, persecutor, and rescuer. And I got to tell you, the last couple of times I've tried to record my podcast, I have felt totally victimized. Today, the persecutor was my phone, which normally I'm fine just putting it in airplane mode and it works great. I started recording and I guess some old notifications were, I don't know what was happening, but I felt persecuted by my phone. I turned it off. So I guess in that case, I'm the victim. The phone was the persecutor and I'm my own rescuer. That's a terrible example. We're going to have better ones. So for today's episode, I'm borrowing very heavily from a guy named David Emerald. He has a classic book called The Power of Ted, The Empowerment Dynamic. It's not a perfect book. Nothing is. But he does do a very good job of not only describing the drama triangle, but also proposing an alternative. So let's talk about why we're calling this a drama triangle. It's called a drama triangle because it creates drama. When you have a situation where you have an identified victim, an identified persecutor, and a rescuer, this does not create peace. This does not create harmony. This does not create a relationship that works for all parties. And we have to be careful talking about this because victim has been weaponized. And I want to shout from the rooftops that it is possible to be a victim. People do terrible things to other people. Hurricanes happen. Fires happen. If your house burns down from a fire, you are a victim. You are a victim of that fire. And so wanting to get some help and resources for what happened to you is not playing the victim. Feeling distraught, sad, traumatized when something terrible has happened to you is not you playing the victim. And recovering from being victimized takes time. It's a process. So let's not re-victimize people by persecuting them for having been victimized. Can we just agree to that right now? When something terrible has happened to you, you have been victimized. You are a victim. Acknowledging that, recovering from that, is not someone playing the victim. Okay? All right, let's not weaponize our psychological tools. We're not going there. We don't do that. All right, so let's talk about the drama triangle. So we have someone who is a victim. What are the characteristics of a victim? Primarily, at the heart of the person who is the victim is a loss. It's a loss. It can be a loss of freedom. It can be a loss of a desire or an aspiration. It can be a loss of safety. It can be a loss of identity. Let's say you have your whole life. I'm taking this from a TV show. Your whole life thought you were Irish, and you do 23andMe and you find out you're Greek. If you were really invested in your identity as someone of Irish heritage, you're going to experience that as a loss. It's going to feel like a loss. And so when you lose that sense of identity, you don't know, who am I? You could begin to feel like a victim. In this case, the persecutor to your victimhood is a circumstance, or maybe it's a family story, or maybe it's your grandfather who always told you you were Irish. That's a really minor example, but I want to tread carefully as we're digging into this territory so we can understand the concepts without feeling persecuted by the podcast. So, at the heart of victimhood is a loss, but it's not just any loss. It's a loss that leads to a feeling of powerlessness. It's when something happens that uproots something that means something to you. It's your parents won't let you hang out with your friend group. And so now you've lost your freedom and you've lost your friendship, and you feel persecuted because you feel powerless to do anything about it. So at the heart of victimhood is some kind of loss that leads to a sense of powerlessness. I was just working on a play at a local theater called Sweat, really beautiful play. And it follows a bunch of people who lose their identities because the factory that they worked in, that was their entire world, gets shut down. Who am I if I'm not a factory worker? And they felt powerless to do anything about it, right? Once the powers that be shut down your factory, what are you supposed to do about it? You can't open your own factory. You can't make them stop. You can't make them give you your job back. So it's that sense of something has happened and I'm powerless to change it. So ultimately, that leads us to that victim orientation. You're out of control, you're helpless, and you're hopeless. Let's move on to the persecutor. The persecutor can be a person or a situation. A persecutor can be a person, or it can be a diagnosis. It can be a fiscal policy. In the play example that I just shared with you, the persecutor was, yes, the executives who decided to shut the plant, but it was also NAFTA, the free trade agreement that made those powers that be decide that they would like to save money by moving the plant to Mexico. That's the example in the play. So the persecutor is the cause. The persecutor, the orientation of the persecutor is that they are terrified of being a victim. They fear a loss of control. To the persecutor, if it's a person, it's win or lose. There are winners and there are losers, and I will not be the loser. So whereas the victim feels helpless, the persecutor fears feeling helpless. They fear being a victim. They fear a loss of control. They fear being the loser in a win-lose dynamic. So some of the primary tools of a persecutor are blame, criticism, and oppression. Persecutors control other people in order to not feel controlled. Persecutors blame other people in order to not be blamed. Now, savvy listeners may be wondering, wait, doesn't a victim blame the persecutor for their suffering? Yeah, file that away. So you have your victim, who feels helpless and hopeless. And you have your persecutor who wants to control other people or other situations so that they don't feel helpless or hopeless. Many persecutors behave in a self-righteous, grandiose kind of way. They're the people who get on the internet and they're like, how dare you? Or they're deeply convinced of how right they are, and they will fight to the death to make sure you acknowledge them as having the right point of view. So when someone is in criticism and oppression and that win-lose, self-righteous kind of point of view, it's black and white. This is right, that is wrong. I'm the winner, you're the loser. They're being in the persecutor role. So third up, we have the rescuer. And flat out, there are so many people in the helping professions who are rescuers. And what the rescuer does is they swoop in to the side of the victim and they say, oh, you poor thing. I can't believe these people are doing this thing to you. Oh my gosh, how terrible is that? And the rescuer can be a person, but sometimes it's a situation or a behavior or a substance. A rescuer, when it's not a person, is anything that helps the victim numb out. The victim doesn't want to feel like a victim, and the rescuer comes and helps that person numb out. It can be your Instagram feed, it can be your porn, it can be your alcohol, it can be your pot, it can be your shopping, it can be your overworking, right? If you're a victim and you feel helpless and hopeless, you just want to numb out by, taking extra shifts at the hospital so you don't have time to think. That's the rescuer. Anything that helps you numb out. When the rescuer is a person, the rescuer is motivated by a fear of being irrelevant. The rescuer needs the victim in order to feel good about themselves. They need to feel helpful. The rescuer feels a loss of purpose. I define myself as someone who is helpful. So if you define yourself as someone who is helpful, then you need someone to need your help. If you define yourself as a problem solver, then you need people with problems. So the rescuer comes along and helps the victim. They help the victim. They listen to the victim. They help say, yeah, that persecutor is a POS, a piece of poop. And you have that dynamic continues. Victim, rescuer, and persecutor. All of these parts are motivated by a kind of fear. The victim is motivated by the fear that things can never change, that they don't have the power to change whatever has happened or is happening to them. The persecutor fears being a victim, fears being out of control, fears being helpless. So they dominate and control other people and other situations in order to not have that feeling. And the rescuer is afraid of not being needed, is afraid of not having a purpose. So the reason why this triangle creates so much drama is because it is based on fear. The other part is that it's this movable little mobile. In this triangle, no one has to stay in the same role. You may have already heard a hint about how the victim can be the persecutor. So if I'm in a relationship with you and I feel like you're you're not giving me what I need. You're my persecutor. I keep asking you for something and you keep not giving it to me. So you're persecuting me. So what do I do in response? I stonewall you. I just stop talking to you. You're not giving me what I need, so I'm going to give you the silent treatment. Well, now you feel like a victim, right? I am persecuting you by giving you the silent treatment. And so now you're a victim and you're blaming me. Like, she's the one that's causing the problem. I'm just over here trying to do the best I can. And she's giving me the silent treatment. And I'm over here like, I'm doing the best I can. And, he's over here not getting me my needs met. And so what we have is this movable feast of victim and persecutor. That one's obvious. But sometimes the rescuer actually becomes the persecutor. So I'm feeling like a victim. My partner isn't meeting my needs, right? I have needs, they're not meeting them. And along comes this other person who pays attention to me, who makes me feel important, who makes me feel like I'm deserving of things I'm not getting. So we start having an affair. Great. I have my rescuer. I have been saved from my horrible marriage. Well, what happens when my rescuer starts making demands? No, I want you to spend Christmas with me. It's an important holiday. Just leave your spouse. Come spend Christmas with me. Well, now you're my persecutor, right? Now you're making demands on me that I just really am not ready to meet. So I start to blame you and criticize you for trying to control me and keep me from doing what things at my own pace. So now the rescuer is my persecutor. And now the rescuer feels like the victim. And I'm the persecutor to my rescuer. And meanwhile, the other persecutor is the victim because I'm having an affair. So you can see how these parts get deeply, deeply entangled and messed up. And one of the ways that it gets messed up is someone will change roles and the other people don't acknowledge it. So I'm still trying to be your rescuer and you're treating me like a persecutor and I get all confused and I get a victim and now I need to go play video games 12 hours a day to numb out because of my victim feelings. Ugh, right? Oh, it's kind of gross. Does that also sound kind of familiar? And if you think you have not ever played any of those three roles, you have. You have. I want you to think about any time you've been a victim. And you know how you know you've been a victim? In this context, not when something has happened to you. When you've complained about someone else. When you've complained about someone else and you complain about them because it's a situation you can't do anything about. My boss sucks. She does this to me. She does that to me. She's this way. She's that way. Blamey, 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 blame. What are you doing about it? Well, there's nothing I can do about it. Right? That's a victim point of view. How do you know you're a persecutor? If you're fighting to be right, you're in persecutor mode. You're in persecutor mode. If you're like self-righteous, like, no, this is how things are. And I'm going to keep going until you agree with me or until you admit that you're wrong. You're in persecutor when you can try to control someone else. I hear you. Wait. I have to control my 13-year-old child. I'm responsible for them. I have to make sure that they're safe. Okay. There are certain situations where you have to make decisions. You slip into persecutor mode when you are using blame, when you are using criticism, when you are operating from, I'm going to win and you're going to lose and you're going to do what I tell you what to do. You're in rescuer mode when you're like, oh, poor baby, how could this thing happen to you? Come over here, let me help you. You're in rescuer mode. Am I telling you not to take your friend's side when they come and complain to you about their boss? No, that's your job as a friend. That is your job as a friend. You're like, oh yeah, let's go beat her up. Don't really do that. You're joking, right? Okay. But just recognize that there is a dark side to playing any of these roles because it continues to reinforce the drama part of the drama triangle. So we're going a little long, so we're going to stop here. I want you to really consider the fear at the base of this situation, the drama triangle. It's fear. It's motivated by fear. Something terrible is happening, and I fear there's nothing I can do about it. I'm helpless and hopeless in this situation. When that happens, you are in a victim stance. I'm not saying you're playing the victim. I'm not like, oh, you victim. You're taking a victim stance. When you fear being controlled, when you fear losing, when you fear being wrong, you are taking a persecutor stance. When you try to swoop in and save someone from themselves or other people, you are in the rescuer stance. Let me do that for you, you poor thing who can't do it for yourself. You are taking a rescuer stance. Can we argue that there are times when each of these roles is necessary? Yes. Let's not get in the weeds looking for the exceptions. Let's take a moment and look at the rule. And let's have a good look in the mirror and in our own hearts and acknowledge when we have contributed, making up words, when we have contributed to the drama in our world by playing a role in the dreaded drama triangle. Next time, we'll get into how this happens and what we can do instead. And with that, did you know how amazing you are? Well, let me tell you, you're pretty freaking fantastic. Yeah, you really are. I want you to just acknowledge that for a moment. And would you please remember that right here, right now, exactly as you are whole, you are perfect, you are complete, and you are worthy and deserving of a life so glorious, it transcends even your own imagination. Until next time.